Let's now discuss the data requirements and business rules you need to be aware of with regards to CTE reporting. The Career and Technical Education program is the practice of teaching specific career skills to students in middle school, high school, and post-secondary institutions. In California, the program is broken into 15 different industry sectors. And within those industry sectors, it's further broken down into pathways. Here are the 15 industry sectors in California. Each industry sector is further divided into pathways, which is further broken into courses that students enroll in and complete. Let's say, for example, you have the medical industry. The medical industry will have different pathways. Within the pathway, you have different classes or courses. A pathway could be a 2-course pathway, a 3-course pathway, and a 4-course pathway depending on the total number of hours needed to complete a pathway. Generally, you may have a 3-course pathway. You have the intro class, the concentrator class, and the capstone class. The classes should be taken in order. The capstone class is the last class that should be taken, as this will identify a student who completes it as a CTE completer. The SCTE data is just one part in a bigger CTE data reporting picture. Students enrolled or completing a pathway will also require the CRSC and the SCSC records. The CRSC will contain the CTE state course code that is associated to the pathway, and it also contains a course section ID. The SCSC will contain the course section ID and the SSID that is associated to the student taking that pathway. And then the SCTE file will contain the SSID, the CTE pathway ID that the student is participating in, and if a student is a completer, the CTE completion year. After graduation or after a student completes their high school, the LEA will send out a survey 6 months after completion, and based on that survey, the PSTS record is established. That survey will basically indicate the student's status after high school completion, if the student went into the workforce or continued on to college. The PSTS is reported in fall 2 of the subsequent academic year. So if we're reporting the CRSC, SCSC, and SCTE file of a student who completed high school in 2019-2020, the PSTS record will be submitted in academic year 2020-2021. So along with the key data elements taken from the CRSC and SCSC files, the following data are collected from the SCTE file. First is the CTE Completer info, which identifies the student as having completed a minimum of 300 hours in a state-approved CTE pathway. Second is the CTE pathway code, which indicates the specific career pathway and industry the student participated in and completed. And lastly is the CTE completion year, which indicates the academic year the student completed the capstone course for the pathway being reported. Students completing CTE classes are categorized based on a student's CTE course completion as well as pathway participation. Anyone who completes a CTE course, regardless of CTE pathway participation or not, are considered CTE participants. The CTE participants are then broken down into 2 categories as reflected on the CTE reports. First are your non-completer participants. These are students who have completed a CTE course who may or may not be participating in a pathway but do not meet the definition of a CTE completer that we will be explaining next. Also, these are students who merely take CTE courses as an elective or students enrolled in a CTE pathway but are taking CTE courses flagged as intro or concentrator courses. CALPADS determines these students based on the CRSC and SCSC records reported for end of year. Second category is the CTE Completer group. These are students who were locally identified to have completed a minimum of 300 hours in a state-approved CTE pathway and has successfully passed the capstone course in that sequence with a grade of C- or better. This is self-reported by the LEA to CALPADS by submitting the SCTE record, identifying them as a completer, and along with the CRSC and SCSC record identifying the capstone course and grade of the student in that course. It is important that the CRSC, SCSC, and SCTE records reflect the current reporting year to be properly identified by CALPADS in the reports. Let us now dig deeper into how these CTE groups are reported and identified in CALPADS. For non-CTE Completer participants, you only need to submit the CRSC and SCSC records. The CRSC record will contain the CTE state course code identifying the class as intro or concentrator, while submitting the SCSC record associated with the CRSC record will link the student to the course. CALPADS will then recognize the CRSC and SCSC record and categorize the student under the reports. Do not submit a SCTE record for non-CTE completer students. For CTE completers, you report the CRSC, SCSC, and the SCTE record. The CRSC record will contain the CTE state course code identifying the capstone course, while the SCSC record associated with the CRSC record will link the student to the course. The final piece to the equation is the SCTE record, which identifies the CTE pathway the student is participating in and the completion year ID. Just a reminder, students participating in a CTE pathway must take the CTE pathway courses in the proper order from intro to capstone. This will help properly track the students' hourly completion progress internally, and also ensure that the CRSC, capstone course, and SCSC grade will all be reported in the current reporting period that the student is flagged as a CTE completer.